Okay, some of you are wondering, I wonder what I'm doing here. Well, I need your help, and I got a wide variety of people from all over the city, and we're going to talk today. We're just going to have a good conversation about newspapers. So, I came of age working for this newspaper. As I caught the elevator every morning at Britain and Broadway, I always saw the quote from Edward L. Gaylord. The newspaper is much more than just publishing the news and advertisements. The Oklahoman is mightily involved in building a city, a state, and a better America. I knew that that quote was true. I had seen it through the years. I knew what support and strength that this newspaper brought to this city and the Gaylord family. The Oklahoman has indeed been mightily involved, not only in chronicling the city's rise from a pasture, but also in chronicling all the events and special things that happen to all of us in our lives are captured by the newspaper. We are one of the first chronicles of history. So before we move forward, I want to give a nod to the past. And I've asked Bob Blackburn to join us. Oh, there you are, Bob. Come on up, Bob. Bob's going to I just think it's appropriate. There's been a lot of transition. As you all know, Gatehouse purchased the paper in October. And I just think it's time for a pause, and let's give a nod to our roots.
Well, when Kelly called and asked if I would join you today, I said, well, I'm going to be on annual leave last 2 weeks of the year, but I will be there for this purpose. Some of you know who Will Rogers was. Of course, Will had many famous sayings, but one of my favorite sayings from Will Rogers is, all I know is what I read in the newspaper. Well, when the Oklahoma Historical Society was created in 1893, it was not created by historians or by people at a university. It was created by the Oklahoma Territory Press Association, because those journalists in 1893 knew the importance of what they were doing, which was recording our history one community, one day at a time. And they wanted a place to collect those newspapers, knowing that each one of those pages, every day of collecting the story of what happened, making some sense out of it, writing it, together one day would make this tapestry. And as we step back with perspective, we see the history. My favorite room in the History Center today is where we still collect every newspaper published in the state of Oklahoma every week or every day. We still microfilm, we still digitize, we're putting them online. Well, there's a reason why we have got to step up at this critical time in the history of newspapers in the country as well as here in the state and city. One is that we have got to encourage civic action to deal with challenges and to take advantage of opportunities. You've heard many of my speeches over the years. Every one is built around challenges. How do we deal with it? Individuals, as a community together. How do we recognize those opportunities and say, this is the direction we're going? The newspaper has had a role in that, as it did in 1910. When the question was, where will our state capital be located? Congress had dictated it would be in Guthrie. Guthrie, 10,000 people in 1900. 1910, still 10,000 people. Oklahoma City, 10,000 people in 1900. 64,000 people in 1910. But to get the support of the community, to energize, to get them to take action, took a voice. That voice was the newspaper. The capital was moved, and even though descended into a depression in 1911 when all the crops around the state failed, Oklahoma City kept going forward. Same thing would be in 1939 and 1940 as the country was marching towards war. The world was at war. America was being dragged into it. They knew they needed an air depot somewhere in the middle part of the country to support the war effort. People made a deal with the Army, but it depended on one important thing. The people of this community had to step up and vote for a bond issue, to buy the land, to build the infrastructure, to provide the support, to bring what would become Tinker Air Force Base, Douglas Bomber Aircraft Assembly Plant, employing over 45,000 people, would continue to make a difference. The newspaper led the charge. And then in 1993, trying to crawl out of our second Great Depression that really started in 1985 with the failure of the First National Bank, the strategies that had worked since 1946 were not working any longer. How do we drag ourselves out of it? How do we bring hope back to the story of Oklahoma City? And as this idea of community action came together, who was beating the drum every day, talking about the opportunities? How do we deal with these challenges? How do we pull together in one direction? Of course, we now know that as MAPS, and the Oklahoman was leading the charge again, letting people know what were the challenges, what are the opportunities. Then secondly, we've got to have newspapers, if we are going to have an informed public, to promote needed change. Change is the only thing that never changes. And because we have one set of rules and structures to deal with the problem of the 1920s does not mean it will work in the 1940s or the 1980s or the 2000s. People don't like change. There has got to be a voice to reach in and say, this is not working, to bring it to the public's attention, to encourage change. That is never easy. A couple of examples. In the 1950s and 60s with the Supreme Court scandal, that old system of electing the judges, of having to raise money to run for office, was in itself a corrupting influence in a modern society. Because of the changes coming out of that scandal, we've had an independent judiciary. Even though people have made assaults on it since, we still have an independent judiciary that, as much as possible, takes the political process out of it. Again, the newspaper covered through investigative reporting, made sure people understood what the problem was as well as what the solutions might be. In the 1980s, the county commissioner scandal. County commissioners were the most important officers of all of state government in 1907, when 80% of our population lived in rural Oklahoma. Most of the services delivered to citizens would have been local. That was no longer the case by the 30s and 1940s. An antiquated system coming into the 1980s. Prosecutors, FBI found a trail to reach into that system. The newspaper was there every day, of gathering the information, of letting people know what was going on, encouraging change to a system that needed to change. Out of that came new purchasing laws for the state. And then in the more recent days, after years of political rhetoric, gaining a lot of votes by saying, lock them up. Let's get the crooks off the streets. Let's lock them up forever. 3 strikes and you're out. With Oklahoma becoming the #1 state in the incarceration of women. A series of investigative reports in the Oklahoman would personalize the story. Not just some distant policy that state leaders had to manage, but something that affected our neighbors, people we knew, families, made it personal, created an atmosphere where the leaders could step back from that political rhetoric all those years and say, the system is broken. Let's do something about criminal justice reform. And then finally, every community must work together to make progress. We've seen the results of the politics of divide, of fear, of hate, perpetual crisis. A community can only move forward when we're doing it together. And as a historian who's now lived in this community for over 40 years, I've seen the fact that we have come together more than once to make changes. And how do we do that? Doesn't happened naturally. We're all worried about our families, maybe our extended clans, maybe the people in our neighborhood or the people who look like us or dress like us or live in the same neighborhoods. What binds us together? In my opinion, one of the most important forces there has been provided by the newspaper, and that's what I call shared memory. Creating a sense of community are the places that we all share. For us baby boomers, it was going to the zoo in that ship with those monkeys out on that. It was a free zoo at the time. That experience. Each of you who are baby boomers can remember that sight. It's something we share in common. The newspaper was a champion for the zoo all of those years. Spring Lake Park, Wedgwood Park for the other baby boomers. And then more recent generations, the Bricktown experience. We share that experience of going down and seeing the grass growing out of those brick streets in 1978. We saw the desolation of Neil Horton losing his dream and going bankrupt. We remember going down to Spaghetti Warehouse and then watching the district change and the canals being built and the people coming back and the vibrancy we now feel. That is something we share. People coming from outside see the results. We saw the process. It is shared memory. And it's also the things that the newspaper has promoted and the things that we do. For us baby boomers, again, the National Finals Rodeo. We can all remember, if you ask Oklahomans, everybody was there the day that Freckles Brown rode Tornado. Everyone thinks they were there, just like everyone says they voted for maps. But we know about 45% of you did not vote for maps. But our shared memory is Tornado, Freckles Brown, National Finals Rodeo, the spirit of the cowboy, what that represents in our history. The newspaper was there from the very beginning, encouraging, bringing that here, sustaining it. Same thing for the state fair with that annual supplement going all the way back. The E.L. Gaylord's fascination with that fair, knowing to save the fair, it would have to move out of that quarter section on the east side to something bigger and better, a full section of land, old school land, 10th and May. And the newspaper sponsoring a pavilion from that very first day that some of us remember from our childhood. And then the newspaper every year promoting a fair place that draws the community together one time a year. And then, most obviously today, see it in the newspaper this morning with some great articles. Constant coverage, that is the Thunder. Nothing in our history has ever, not even George Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath or John Ford's Grapes of Wrath movie, not even Oklahoma, in my opinion, the stage play and movie, has done as much for our both internal image and external image as the Thunder. And every day we are reminded in the newspaper of how important that one institution is to us. And I'll never forget one of the great lines in Sam Anderson's new book on Oklahoma City, Boomtown, is a line from that special night, and I was there, season ticket holder, in the playoffs when the Lakers were here, in that final game when we lost at the last second, put back, the crowd had a momentary moment of silence, and then a thunderous applause. And I was part of that. It was spontaneous. Sam Anderson wrote, that was not a stadium full of fans. That was a stadium full of citizens. The Oklahoman had been there since the very beginning, in the days of the Hornets, the Thunder, what that means to us. We feel like those players are our family. My wife had never even watched an NBA game, and she said, we are getting season tickets. That maternal impulse came out. But the newspaper was part of that. And then finally, the things that we remember for all times, the things that are part of us, just like the impact of our parents and our grandparents and aunts and uncles, the day our children are born. These things we will never forget, but there's one thing in this community that we will never forget, and the newspaper should have won a Pulitzer out of the coverage. One reason I think that is so ingrained in our memory today was the newspaper, and that is the Murrah bombing. Of an entire community being attacked by a terrorist of us trying to recover, to do what we could to heal, to come together as a community. That would change Oklahoma City forever. The newspaper was critical for bringing both the information together, but also channeling a way for us to express our own deepest sympathy for those who died, those who were injured, those families affected. It is now part of who we are. A sense of community, a sense of civic involvement, a way to inform the public on what are the challenges, where are the opportunities, and how can we work together to move. If we are to remain a vibrant community, I truly believe with all of my heart that we have got to have a strong, independent, vigorous newspaper that has the resources to investigate, to report, to share that message. How that message is distributed, that will be determined in the marketplace. But we have to have those reporters and those photographers and those business people and the editors and the typesetters. We have to have everyone there to do their job so the rest of us in this community can do our jobs, which is to build a better community for our children and grandchildren. Please step up. Let's help save the Oklahoman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Bob is always such a great speaker. I'm kind of wondering what I was thinking. And I get to follow that. I want to introduce somebody who has been with us for the last 3 months. It's Jim Hobson. Jim comes to us, well, he's retired and he wants to go back to Florida and play golf. But Gatehouse sent him in here to help us kind of get our ducks in a row and help us get in a good place to move forward. So Jim, you want to come up, say a few words about Gatehouse and our new owners.
Hi, everybody. I've worked in the newspaper business for 45 years. It's been great to have a job that I love in a business that really matters to the communities and nation that we serve. But I have to admit that the last dozen years in this business have been by far the most challenging. History is loaded with examples in which the status quo has been rocked by technological change. Cars made horse-drawn buggies obsolete. Digital photography and smartphones made cameras and film obsolete. Cell phones made landlines obsolete. And I could view these disruptions with the remove of a disinterested observer until it happened to me. And the business I loved and worked in all my life was changed. I've had a ringside seat for the biggest changes in the media business since Gutenberg invented movable type. The widespread availability of high-speed internet, laptops, and smartphones has rocked the newspaper business model. Consumer preferences for how they get and use information have changed a lot. And print audiences have diminished. Businesses have learned to use digital advertising efficiently and creatively. And newspaper advertising revenues in the last 12 years have decreased by a factor of 70%. With the big declines in print audiences and revenues, publishers have just had to scramble in order to survive. Try to imagine what a 70% decline in your primary revenue stream would do to your own business. Hundreds of newspapers have shut down in the last few years, and lots of others, like the Oklahoman, have been sold to big companies like Gatehouse, the Oklahoman's new owners. Gatehouse has become this country's largest publisher of daily newspapers, publishing 145 daily newspapers in 37 different states, including 5 here in Oklahoma. Gatehouse can succeed where others cannot because they have the scale, the centralized services, and the management expertise to thrive in this new media environment. Gatehouse has also worked hard to grow new digital revenues and audience and to enter new growing businesses like the production of live events. The Oklahoman, despite its glorious history and importance to this city and state, was losing money. Gatehouse made a bet that it could operate the Oklahoman as a stable and prosperous business again. And so it will. We're already back in the black, and we expect to have a solid 2019. Gatehouse did not buy the Oklahoman to diminish it or to impose its political philosophy here. The Oklahoman will continue to provide this community with outstanding news, business, and sports coverage, just as it has for more than 100 years. Gatehouse expects decisions about news coverage and the positions taken on the editorial page to be made here by Oklahoman people. Gatehouse expects the Oklahoman to engage with and not withdraw from this community. You're going to see some changes, but those changes are intended to keep your newspaper stable and prosperous for a long time to come. And I'm pleased to announce a big change today. The new publisher of the Oklahoman is a journalist well known to you, a daughter of the state of Oklahoma, the editor of the Oklahoman, Dyer Fry. It is my great honor to introduce to you the new publisher of the Oklahoman, in my estimation, the perfect choice for the job, Dyer Fry.
I told him at the office this morning that Jim's ready to go back and play golf, and plus, I got to get this guy off my payroll. Spoken as a true publisher. So here we are. Let's fast forward to today. Now I walk in every morning, and there's a painting, an artist rendering of E.K. Gaylord in the hall. Now I walk by every morning, and I look up at that picture, and I pause, and with great reverence I say, I know, right? He doesn't laugh. But here we are, it's 2018, more than a century since the first Oklahoman rolled off the presses. It's only had 3 owners, and I've worked for all 3. The Gaylord years were the shining years. It's true the newspaper made a lot of money. It's also true that this city has benefited beyond measure from the good fortunes of the Oklahoman and the Gaylord family. They're still impacting our city today. The Gaylord Foundation, the Ennis Butch Foundation, and the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism are all rooted in the newspaper. The newspaper has given back. For the last 7 years, Phil Anschutz gave to the city as well. He gave millions in philanthropy throughout Oklahoma City. Thousands have been employed by the newspaper. No doubt we have been good citizens. We have been good partners. Now we need to view Gatehouse as our partner. Yes, they own us, but what we make of our newspaper is up to us. And I'll say it today, and I'll say it repeatedly. Our strength and quality are commensurate with the level of support we get from our community. That's why I've asked you here today to be an advocate for us. Today, our community supports us at the level you see in today's paper. I've heard a few of you grumble recently that it's just too small. I have witnessed this city move mountains. When we unite, when we stand shoulder to shoulder, we get it done. Tornadoes, the bombing, we know how to work together. There is no better example of working with unity than MAPS. It comes down to this: what do we as Oklahomans want? Do we want to know what our elected officials are doing? Do we want to know how our tax dollars are being spent? Do we want to shine a light on our shortcomings and work toward improvements? I ask you, if not us, who? Who will do beat journalism? I would like our reporters and all of our staff members who are here today to stand up. Please, some of them are seated at your tables. You know, we've got a lot of former journalists here too with us today. So, and I'm going to pause for a minute and make note. Sue Hale is here. Sue is my mentor, has been for the last 25-ish years, and I thank her. Ed Martin and Ed Kelly are here, two other gentlemen who played strong roles in my career and my development. They all kind of raised me collectively. Well, what I want to talk to you about is beat journalism. Who will do beat journalism? City Hall, school board, committee hearings at the Capitol, the ins and outs of state government. We cover far too many government meetings, and we are often the only media present. I say this with love in my heart to all our friends and elected officials, some of whom are here today. But what will go on if government operates behind closed doors? We challenge our elected officials and we hold them accountable. I concur with the tagline of the Washington Post: democracy dies in darkness. How divisive might we become? Will we all be drawn to the like-minded blogger? Writers who see the world as we do. As our country becomes more polarized, it is time for us to stop and ask ourselves, what is in the best interest of our community, of our city? Will we be best served by filter bubbles or by civil discourse? It was clear to Thomas Jefferson when he said, "I would rather have newspapers without government than a government without newspapers." He also said, "A well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny." So you may ask yourself today, how can I help? I invited you all here today because I need your help. We need your help. First and foremost, please subscribe. I'm not going to go check the rolls later after the luncheon and see how many of you do. But please subscribe. We need your support, and we won't make it without you. Put copies in your break rooms. Buy subscriptions for your employees. Talk about the importance of the Oklahoman and beat journalism within your own places of business. We need ambassadors because what we do matters. Our circulation drop has been real and significant. Our Sunday circulation once topped 300,000. Today we stretch just over a third of that. The world changed faster than we could adjust our business model. But having an owner like Gatehouse allows us to scale, and a lot of our in-house operations can now be handled by Gatehouse Corporate. It allows us to continue covering our city. So I'm asking you today to view Gatehouse as our partner and to spread to other people that they're not the devil. This newspaper is now, I say it's trued up, because this is the level of support that we're getting from our city. So we're back in the black. We're not going under. It was nice when we had a billionaire that wanted to cover it for us until he did not. So we were lucky. We were lucky that Gatehouse stepped in. It could have been another chain, and this is a chain that I have visited with many of the owners and the people who run the company, and let me just tell you, and please trust me when I say this, they're good people. I spent an hour on the phone with the CEO, and he's a good person, and he believes in journalism, and he has a passion for it, and he's going to help us keep going in this city. Today we're going to have some discussions. And I want you to think of this in a little different paradigm. Don't think of us as a product, okay? Because some of you are mad. Your product is smaller. Don't think of us as just a product. Think of us as a service. What lands on your doorstep, okay, maybe your driveway, is the best of what we found out the day before. But the very day that you're picking up and reading this newspaper, we're still out there. We're out there all day long working for you. We are your eyes and your ears. We want to let you know what's going on in your community. And we want to be able to bang the drum when our city needs to unite and draw ourselves together to take care of business. So I want to give a lot of time for table discussion. So I would like you to continue your meals, and I have several things that I need you to do at your tables. I would like for each table to come up, and I need you to come up with ideas on how the Oklahoman can get stronger, okay? So we're talking, some ideas with some ROI. So we need to be thinking about that. Also at your table, I want 2 areas that you think the newsroom should focus on in 2019. Okay, we covered a lot of ground in 2018, mental health and justice reform and education, all still critically important, but I'm asking this group, you're my focus group today, what are the 2 main issues? And your table has to come to a consensus. So that can be challenging too. There is a reporter's notebook at every table, isn't it? So, one person at your table is a reporter, and you cannot pick the Oklahoman professional reporter. Has to be somebody else who will take notes and report out for your table. So you can fight over that. And then you have some sticky notes on your table, and I would like for you to take your sticky notes, and you can send me headline messages. A headline message is just short and to the point. We fit our headlines to make them fit within the newspaper every day, so here's your turn. You can write headline messages, and we'll find a place at the end. We'll put them on the doors. You can also, on your sticky note, this is where individuals get a vote. Tell me what's the one thing, only pick one thing you really miss that's been taken out of the paper that you want back. So you can put that on your sticky note, and I have a third thing on your sticky note. If you're interested in joining as a volunteer for a quarter to be on our editorial board, put your name and your email on it and say, I'd like to volunteer for the board, and we'll see how many we get. And we'll go from there and see how we can maybe work up a system to have more voices on our pages. So I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes, and then we will have some discussion. So talk amongst yourselves. Thank you. So we're going to go pretty quickly here because I want to get you guys out of here on time. And anybody who wants to linger afterwards, I'm around and available to discuss. So let's start with those good ideas and good thoughts. Dave?
Anybody around me have any good ideas, good thoughts you want to share? Anybody? Kelly, what was the discussion at your table? You guys were chatting. Oh, right here. Yes, ma'am.
We've got a lot of good ideas.
Give us a minute.
Okay. Well, we think education should be the focus for the next year. But we believe in problems being presented, but also positives, business success. We also have a great interest in entertainment, and we think your sports department does a terrific job.
Thank you, Jane.
Ladies and gentlemen, our sports department right there. Well played, ma'am. Well played.
We understand, we feel a terrific need for the in-depth work that's been done in news. We have a concern for the branded pieces that appear to be like news, but in fact are sponsored. We're not crazy about that.
What do you mean by concern?
Well, concern is that they appear to be news, and they're not. They're paid for, so they're promotional pieces, and they appear as news, and we don't like that.
Did you hear the part earlier, Jane, about the money?
I think we should use social media to promote what people are missing if they're not reading the newspapers, and we can all do that personally.
She does have a list.
I do have a list, and we have a great headline, thanks to our former governor, Nye. It's a new day, and that's features on all the new leadership, a new city manager, a new governor, a new superintendent of schools, a new mayor, and some new university presidents at Oklahoma City University, OU, and soon at UCO. And Governor Nye said to tell Burns not to worry. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Always good to see you, Jane.
Ben?
All right. They were pretty excited to share, so let's see what we got here. Ideas.
Good afternoon. Our table came up with some interesting ideas. One of the things that we think the Oklahoman has done well, and something that can really be done best in a newspaper or print format, is the in-depth and investigative journalism of important topics to Oklahomans. So we'd like to see that continue. And one of the things that could be considered by some good, some bad, but there has been a noted shift in the approach to editorials, which we think is good, shifting to maybe a more moderate, balanced tone. One of the, as far as improvements, the online subscription model is one area where we talked about a lot. And as is shown in the slides, you know, the average readership being age 55 or older, we feel like there could be some improvements as far as marketing the online subscription model, explaining the subscription model, and we actually came up with a suggestion of possibly giving like trial subscriptions to college students, young professionals, certain demographics who are more apt to go online on their phone and to read the newspaper. And then also an interesting idea of customizable subscriptions. Maybe someone only wants the sports page. You talked about how that was a very big part of the paper. So maybe that could be something people can subscribe only to the sports section and not the entire paper and still get access to the Oklahoman. And online, yeah. And one thing that we noted as being missed from the paper is some of the community focus. And we do realize that there have been staffing changes over the years with the Oklahoman, but missing some of the community reporters and some of the focus in particular on some of the religion issues, the faith community that we used to see a lot more of in the paper. So even though we realize that may not be able to be included in print because there is a limited amount of space, maybe being able to shift some of that online and continue that great coverage would be excellent.
Thank you. I forgot to give you guys a primer before you got started. Advertising drives page count. So just keep that in mind.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have one right here. Debbie Hampton, United Way. Always good to see you.
Always good to see you. I feel like a couple of things. First and foremost, Jim, great hire for the publisher. We all agreed on that. More local business stories. Bring back the metro section. We think that will help if you target like Edmond and some of the other metro section areas. course, you know I'm biased. Please continue the strong support of the nonprofit sector and the awareness of needs. And the video production is amazing with Dave and Paige. It has helped so many nonprofits, not joking, and setting that aside, that really can't afford that video production and getting their message out. You really communicate the needs in Central Oklahoma. And then we kind of mimic this other table, but please, key issues are education, mental health, and criminal justice. Don't forget those.
Thank you, Debbie. By the way, she has super nice penmanship, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, Ben? Hello, Roberta.
Hello, congratulations.
Thank you.
We sort of talked, I think, philosophy a little bit, that the paper should make people care, to try to customize, to be in touch with local news, a real need to reach out to millennials, to connect with them in meaningful ways. I kind of like the idea of the purchasing just the part of the paper you want as far as digitally. It's an interesting idea. We also discussed that op-eds and editorials should be more diverse, sort of across the spectrum, not heavily weighted in one way or the other. But not only to try to get people to care, but to try to get people to take action. And those were our major points.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have Adam Luck. Adam Luck from City Care.
Hello. Congratulations, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right, so we had a couple ideas. Kind of starting out, we just discussed wanting the approach to stories in the paper to be focused more on the why. So if it's a crime story, not just going for the sensationalism, the headline, but really talking about the underlying issues that may have led to this event occurring, that in-depth journalism that we all really want to see.
Like on domestic violence, is that what you're talking about, Adam?
Yes, yeah. Sorry. Also talked about wanting the business section to be more focused on Oklahoma City, local businesses, or at least having some portion of that to be focused specifically on Oklahoma City businesses. We talked a lot about the Oklahoman not shying away from using the Oklahoman to sell the Oklahoman. So writing stories and talking about the importance of what it means to be engaged in local journalism, because that's what the Oklahoman is. And then using advertising space or even story space to talk about the importance of investing in local journalism, and even building ad campaigns around that. We didn't really talk about this, but just having, you go to a restaurant and you see the sticker that says, we're rated, people love us on Yelp. What does it look like for businesses and nonprofits and even homes to have stickers that say, I support local journalism, that has something to do with Oklahoman? Something to tie in that younger generation that's really all about local stuff, really emphasizing that the Oklahoman is local journalism. Yeah, and then we talked about, we mentioned just kind of hosting an event. The table kind of laughed about, events and luncheons and dinners. Everybody does them. We all go to them. So what about one that is hosted specifically to raise an endowment for specific types of journalism? And so we all talk about and lament the decline in print journalism, or just the transition from digital media. From print journalism. So what if we had an event that just focused specifically on creating an endowment that would allow this type of journalism to be written in perpetuity, and thinking that there's plenty of leveraging power in the room to get people there to really support that type of event. So those are some of our ideas.
Thank you.
It's a good business model. Thank you, Adam.
I do want to say that another point, because Debbie made the point too, the Oklahoman has just in 1 year, it's like $2 million that we do in trade and in kind. We're not going to be able to afford to do it at that level. And that is one area we're going to need community support from businesses that can step up and fill that void.
All right, we got it over here.
There you are, Ben.
All right, J.D. Baker from
Hi,
City of Oklahoma
JD.
City. Hi, Kelly. So our table over here, we discussed a lot of different things, but I think some of the ideas that kind of stood out is everyone here pretty much agreed. We like the good stories. We want to read the good news. Good news is always good news. And so we want to read more of that, but we also want to make sure that the media, that the Oklahoma is telling us why are these stories important? What is the impact on me? Even if it's an AP story being reprinted, maybe can we get, a local perspective on that particular AP story, because we know that media literacy is so important and that less and less people are informed about it. and we're not teaching it in schools. And so can we continue to push for media literacy and getting people to understand why is this journalism, why are these stories important, and also being instructive on how readers should trust the news, why we should trust the Oklahoman and their reporting versus fake news in the time of fake news. It's hard to tell what is true and what isn't. Why should we trust this? While also focusing on the accuracy of the reporting of the Oklahoman. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, JD.
We have a couple tables over here. I'll start right here.
All right, so one of the things that we talked about is everyone not in the room, specifically younger people and underserved communities. And so I think the paper needs to do more to be connecting with those groups.
Tyler, I swore I wouldn't be defensive today, but I do want you all to know that the guest list for this reflected the city. We did have a lot of younger people and a lot of diversity on the guest list. Attendance has been different than what happened.
Yeah,
I'm not being defensive, but we need people to be involved, and we need, I appreciate it so much.
Yeah,
so.
and I think finding the right ways.
Engaging.
Luncheons may be tough for people young in their careers to be able to get away at lunch, things like that.
We've got to find a way to connect.
Yeah, finding ways to connect.
Absolutely.
And then I think on News OK, it can get cluttered. I have struggles finding the story that I'm looking for. So those are a couple of things. Partnerships with other local media organizations, whether that's our NPR or Oklahoma Watch the Frontier, Non-Doc. There's lots of media that's doing a really good job, and I think the partnerships, everyone needs to work together to be serving our community in that area. We talked about the comments section and increased interaction and creating that community for discussion, even with non-subscribers, allowing them to be able to be a part of the discussion. And I think connecting reporters with readers, building that collectiveness, and some of the chats I think are a really good way of doing that. Things we'd like to see covered next year, capital coverage, a lot of new people in office, some more capital coverage, and then local. Those are the things that you can't find in the New York Times, and you're not going to find just scrolling through your Twitter feed. So more focus on local.
Thanks,
Cool.
Tyler.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, back.
Ben?
Kelly, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Jazz for you and for the Oklahoman. We broadly agreed on two topics, large umbrella topics. One is culture or life of the city. Right now, culture is exploding in Oklahoma City. We have new restaurants opening all the time, new music venues, rodeo, cinema, and the stockyards. American Indian Cultural Center Museum is about to come online. Shameless plug, Oklahoma Contemporary Art Center, coming to your city in November 2019. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think no organization is better poised to cover that explosion of culture than the Oklahoman. And I think that would be a major driver of ROI. If you can brand the Weekend Oklahoman as our source for what's happening, how to connect with the culture, how to get involved, I think that would be a huge opportunity. Secondly, I think broadly the public policy coverage would be something we see as a major benefit to the city and to the paper. Within that, we each shared stories of other cities we know that have lost out, either their papers have shrunk or gone away, and the private sector was left unchecked, government was left unchecked, and that led to all kinds of challenges for the cities and the localities there. So an investment in investigative journalism for our legislature, the private sector, public policy, social justice, the equitable distribution of resources, development. There's a number of issues that we discussed, but I think all of those would be important. And we touched on this at the very end. I think this might be difficult or a challenge for the paper to be able to afford. I know the New York Times just retired their position, but a public editor or an ombudsman would be a great opportunity to have that reflexive coverage of the paper and to keep it honest. Am I missing anything, team? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
This gentleman right here has some notes.
John Middendorf, First Nazarene, Oklahoma City. We struggled to come up with, to narrow it down to two topics, but we felt like given that we finally are making some headway in criminal justice, it's a perfect time to kind of push that pedal actually a little bit and expand it into juvenile justice, recognizing that inevitably we'll end up talking about education, we'll end up talking about homelessness and chronic poverty. I also want to talk about the disconnect between houses of worship and the neighborhoods around houses of worship. But maybe that would give us a chance to tell more stories of collaboration, where you have houses of worship collaborating together, or perhaps a house of worship that would collaborate with a civic organization or two civic organizations. But we just felt like that those stories of collaboration might help us to envision how we can kind of move from here to there and improve.
My guess is,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my guess is you probably won't get out of this room without Carly Hinton chasing you down.
Yeah, that's happened before. I like that, actually. But also, something we'd like to see come back, Doonesbury.
You know, speaking of that, did I see Dick Tracy on the list over there? I think Tyler had Dick Tracy on his list.
All right,
Ben?
right over here.
So I just want to start out by saying that Governor Walters is seated at my table, and he offended me 3 times in the time that we had the discussion. A couple of ideas that we had that may be worth unpacking and considering and exploring this next year would be Medicaid expansion. We talked about some more dialogue on the death penalty in the state of Oklahoma and where we stand on that today. And we talked about independent redistricting commission as we approach the opportunity to redraw our districts in the state of Oklahoma. Some more discussion on that. I think that comes up in 2020. So this next year might be the year to consider if we're still doing it the right way. We basically believe this, that we need to dream big. We think that the Oklahoman is a leader in fostering and modeling civil discourse. We think to play to our strengths, we could expand our target audience by literally working with some of our foundations to host discussions within our community, much like what we're having here today, about issues that are relevant and important. We think that the Oklahoman should be the leader in modeling and fostering that civil discourse on issues that truly matter, not only to our state, but maybe even beyond. And we think that the Oklahoman may be the catalyst to allow Oklahoma to become a national leader in thinking and in the thought process, a think tank of sorts, so that as we engage in civil discourse, we model that for the rest of the country. And as we bring people in to talk about issues that really matter, and the Oklahoman can report on that for those who may not be able to physically attend, we can be a little bit, we can push the envelope enough. And what we talked about and joked about is that we can have the same kind of conversation that we had at our table in the last 15 minutes and provide that conversation to our entire community and maybe even our entire state by continuing to be a leader in civil discourse in the state of Oklahoma.
Thanks, Chris. These are all good thoughts. Great thoughts. So appreciated.
Lindsay has some notes.
This is my daughter, Lindsay Fry. But she's not a plant.
Our table, most like others here today, our buzzword was education. So we thought about consolidating education through schools on all levels, so higher ed, career tech, common ed. And you know, we need our local partners, our education groups, our local newspapers to stand hand in hand and rally to focus on education across the board. Improvements, we talked about you know, having the ability to endow joint reporters between the Oklahoman and Oklahoma Watch, more retail beats to highlight our local news in different communities, and also more daily video content. To bring back, we talked about the Morning Brew, but a digital version or even a similar version to other platforms out there that we could do on social media for quick local news points that would target millennials or younger groups because they need quick points before they get their minds go elsewhere.
On social media?
Yeah, social media, digital version. To take action, we thought more sponsorships for daily podcasts abbreviated daily recaps for millennials, younger generations. I know that we talk about millennials and getting distracted like we just said, but I think having the ability to have something like daily podcasts for everyone on every level would be beneficial. And then I know others have said this as well, but even better social presence with video, ad buys, sponsorships, to engage all from significant stories to kind of like what Bob was saying, you know, state history, in a way that reaches every age group, not just the younger generations. So.
Thank you.
Good points. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Anyone around here? You got one?
Yes. First of all, Kelly, I have to say that that when you and your siblings and my kids were trying to drown each other, I never dreamed you'd be publisher of the day.
I didn't either.
Our table concentrated largely on the problems that we face rather than the solutions, such as the classified business going off into cyberspace, and young people don't read the newspaper anymore, and digital is something of the future, which could be in the form of facsimile, I suppose. But people will pay for content that they want. And the crux there, I think you have to play from your strength. Probably not very many people were here alive in, say, 1830, 1840, when the wire service was introduced. I remember it very well. I remember it because they said that's the end of newspapers. Nobody's going to need them anymore because we can just say they can get all that information on the wire. And then along came radio, and they said, well, goodbye newspaper, it's all over because we can get it on the radio. Same thing happened with television. When we sold our newspapers in 1999, at that time the advertising breakdown in the United States was 50% newspapers and the other 50% divided to the other media. So that has declined. So the point is we need to get back on our strength. We're facing a catch-22. It seems to be a race on as to how fast the advertising will decline and make it much harder to hire the people and be able to provide that gathering of the information that we most need. I see a definite tendency toward as this millennial age group grows that they're getting a little bit more understanding of the need and the desire and the benefit of having that newspaper in front of them, and with all its various news that makes up our archives that we've got to maintain. And I think the more we can push that element, I think the better chance we'll have of awakening the people to realize that it takes the advertising to produce the results that the public wants and we need.
Thank you, Dick. Newspaper advertising used to make up 80% of our revenue, and now it is less than 50%. Dave, any more tables to hit? Anyone else have anything to add?
Patrick has something.
Two things. First, I think a potential business model would be to let a news junkie like myself to subscribe to, say, a news junkie app, and then when I click on an ad, or I mean on an article from this paper, I don't have to subscribe to that paper, but they get the 10 cents or 25 cents or a buck. So I have an aggregator that helps me, that helps all of the people providing stories to the aggregators, but a little bit of those proceeds go back to the local journalism that produced it. Second thing is I just want to say thank you for asking all of us here today to have this conversation, and thanks for lunch.
Thank you. Speaking of thanks for lunch, I need to thank our sponsors today. We have Inasmuch and the Ethics and Excellence Foundation. Oh, Bob stepped up. There he is. Thank you, Bob. for buying our lunch today. And Witten Burridge Law Firm, Bob Howard, and Paycom. We really appreciate all our sponsors. When all of you leave today, if you'll just do me the favor of telling at least 3 people about your lunch today and talk about the importance that the role of the Oklahoman plays in this community and how it's really up to all of us to figure it out. People, you know, they'll call me on the phone and they'll say, you've taken everything from me, but I just have to put it back on the city itself and say, do you want better? Do you want more? How can we help you? Because we want to be your partner too. So thank you all so very much for coming.